one of the things I want to read to you. I have not read this for a long time. This is from the 2004 article. And I want to read to you this. I read just the paragraph and I thought it was kind of interesting and relevant as the opening to this, what was called demonstrating relationship. We didn't call it building relationship back then. This is from 2004. I will tell you that the publication process for research is very interesting because we submitted this to one tier 1 journal and it was rejected outright. And then we submitted it to another tier 1 journal and it was accepted outright without edit. So kind of interesting. It is a narrative. So Org Dynamics is a great journal, but it wasn't, it's not like an empirically languaged or burdened language. So it was a way for us to describe the research differently. But let me read this to you. It's kind of interesting. It says, in high pressure situations, there will be a strong temptation to disengage from the system. Kind of interesting. That's what we opened with. Differentiated leaders are able to empathize with those who are a part of their emotional system and feel what they feel. I would suggest if I change some of this language today, I would say, and work hard at feeling what other people feel. So I think it's less about whether they have it or not. I probably would use more developmental language. They are good listeners. And again, I would have said they're working hard at listening. Isn't it funny, correcting your younger self? They demonstrate not only that they listen, but that they hear and understand what others are saying and feeling. Emotions expressed by others, however, are often in the form of blame, attacks, anger, or dependency. Differentiated leaders are able to maintain a high level of connection, but remain non-reactive in these situations because they do not allow themselves to perceive emotional outbursts as personal attacks. That ain't bad. I'm looking back going like that. I should be reading my own writing because I don't think I say that well today. It's interesting because it is what it's about, right? It's like perceiving those emotional outbursts as not as personal attacks. Now let me get, if I could read just a little bit on, this is the taking the perspective of others section, which I did not read, so I don't know what's coming. During crises, the differentiated leader is required to act within a system containing multiple stakeholders who bring independent and often competing agendas. The temptation is to focus exclusively on one's own agenda or lose oneself in the multitude of other. Yeah, complex, right? But the importance of the ability to take other people's perspective is well established. The differentiated leader is able to listen aggressively. That's what I wrote. Listen aggressively to others, allowing them to gather a wider range of perspectives, adapt their communication, and avoid emotional triggers. This is a quote. Earlier in my career, I wouldn't have asked for help. This is interesting, Tiffany, given what you just said. Earlier in my career, I wouldn't have asked for help. I would have thought, I'm the smartest guy on earth, end quote, commented one manager. But the older I get, the less I know. I was constantly surprised by where help emerged. It was the glue that held our team together. We were a disparate group of people who had together before. We were all in this together. We had to help each other out. And it was interesting. That was all the setup for taking the perspective of others. It's kind of fascinating. And then we ranked people who were low to high. And let me read what the high description of taking the perspective of others was. This is, we had low, I'll do the low and the high. Let's go with the extremes. So low was some leaders never talked about other people's perspectives or only talked about them in relation to their own points of view. So during our research, some leaders just, that's what they described. There was no connection. We content analyzed for, were they paying attention to other points of view? And some leaders didn't. On the high end, it says a few leaders were able to articulate the things others were dealing with and paint a picture of how they were likely to see things. These leaders were able to take the perspective of the people who were causing the most trouble and anxiety for the leader. We're not talking about listening just like those of us who are really good at the party and listening. We're talking about, I'm listening to you when I don't want to listen to you. That was interesting. And then it says, and the quote is, "I know my group has been under pressure for months," stated one leader, "and it has given them a feeling of powerlessness when it comes to changing our situation." Is what that, the other one is certainly empathy. But what I want to ask you all, and this is where I don't, and this was my experience sometimes personally over the years in the classroom, because I'm working with graduate students, they were a lot of emerging leaders, typically folks in their 20s and 30s. Sometimes I would say things over and over again that I really wanted to have land. And then I'd realize when they had a test, or I had to ask them out loud, like, what was not what I hoped had landed, kind of had to try to be okay with that. So, and so I'm going to try that with you all and then see. I want to ask you, how many of you are familiar with Bowen Theory? Is that familiar to you? So Percy is, because he, back in the day, we talked about this. Dick, are you familiar with Bowen Theory, or Russ?
I've heard the term, but I've heard the term, but I can't pull it up.
And I'm taking a risk, because this is the theory under which, and I'm taking to just go deeper for just a moment about what this is about. This is the theory under which all of this is frameworked. And Bowen Theory is, when we did this research, we could not find anything in the leadership literature that looked like what we were seeing. And the closest thing that we found was this concept of differentiation, was what was called Bowen Theory. And Murray Bowen was the kind of the thinker in this space, now passed away, who then mentored, and he was a family systems theorist.
That's why.
So it wasn't based on organizations, it was based on family systems.
Yeah.
And most family systems, graduate students, like Percy studied, had some of them in our program at Seattle Pacific, they learned Bowen Theory in depth. I will tell you that when I would go speak to our marriage and family students, they looked at me like I was from Mars, because I would speak about it from a leadership perspective instead of a family perspective. And what this is based on is this fundamental tension of self and other. And what they found was, it was studying families under pressure in moments that matter. And what Friedman said when I heard him speak to Microsoft managers, he was asked some really questions, and he said, someone asked him, like, what is the fundamental thing you're looking for in a system of people? And it was, this is like 500 Microsofters, and they were all taking this right to their homes too, but he said, I look for the person who can express themselves with the least amount of blame. He said, if there was a litmus test for this capacity to be differentiated, and you're leading under pressure, this is your pressure profile. You're the person with the greatest capacity to work hard at this emotional maturity is the person who can express themselves with the least amount of blame. If he had to pick a litmus test. And I apologize if some of you heard me tell this story before, but then I'm like, someone else raises their hand in this giant room, and they said, what if the only person in the family is the 16-year-old daughter? Killer question. Because he said that as a consultant, his only job, so Russ, think about this from a coaching perspective, your only job is to identify the leader with the greatest of that capacity. And so then they asked, what if it's the 16-year-old daughter? Because he's basically highlighting the person who's lowest in the totem pole in that system. It's a kid. So this is the same question. What if it's an employee who's not a leader? And what Friedman said is, he said, I will try to isolate that daughter as often as possible to maintain her capacity to do this. In the face of it's an entire system that is going to push her to become like them, to blame. And then someone said, and then I'm like, oh man, this is getting good. Some manager at Microsoft raises his hand and he says, what if there's no 16-year-old daughter? What if there's no person working at this? And what Friedman said, I think that was very wise, is he said, that means in some cases there are systems that need to end, that will implode. We've seen this in marriages. We see it in organizations. When there's no one who will work hard at this, And the thing that I'm telling you all, because you're with us, you are our leaders. These are my people, because you know why? This is why I want to be around you at a party, because you're working at this. And it doesn't mean you're broken, but you're working at it. And you want high capacity people, man, find the people who are in a season where they will work at it. And it's hard to do. And so that's what this theory is based upon. You know, as you think about working with leaders, because many of you will be in those positions where you've been around us long enough, and you're going to go out and work on this with other people. This is what's going on, is trying to identify these people who will work. I'm trying to change my language, who are not differentiated, but who will work hard at this in the moment. Those are the ones who are developmentally ready, who will have a long-term exponential impact on the effectiveness of the organization, not because they're focusing on effectiveness, but because they're showing up in a way that changes everything. This is the number of of 2-year conversations that organizations have to have with immature people. You know what I mean? And it doesn't mean that there isn't a call to accountability. It doesn't mean that those things aren't there, but we're being thoughtful about whether it's just simply a matter of reactivity, or whether we're really connected into what is going on here, and can I change this system, and am I aware of the people who disagree with me, who might be right? Am I aware in that stupid, I'll sit in my inbox as soon as we sign off today?